The prison camp on Thekmore stretched across a barren landscape of red rock and purple sky. Jake had been here for 3 years now, and the alien world still felt hostile and wrong. The gravity was heavier than Earth's, making every movement an effort. The air tasted metallic and burned his lungs when he first arrived. Though he had grown used to it, Jake's crew had not survived the first year. Sam Carter died from infections that the HFY medical staff refused to treat. Lisa Park succumbed to a fever that swept through the human prisoners during their second winter. Pete Baker lasted longest, but eventually the poor food and harsh conditions wore him down until his heart simply stopped beating one night. Jake buried them all in the rocky ground behind the prison barracks, marking their graves with stones arranged in patterns that meant something to humans, but nothing to their captors. He was alone now, the only survivor of his squadron, carrying the weight of their memory and the knowledge of what the HFY represented to Earth. The prison camp held creatures from dozens of different worlds. Most had been here so long they had given up any hope of escape or rescue. They shuffled through their daily routines like walking dead, their spirits broken by years of captivity. Jake refused to become like them. Every morning he exercised in his cell, keeping his body strong. Every day he watched the guards, learning their patterns and weaknesses. The HFY treated their prisoners like animals in a zoo. They provided just enough food to keep them alive, and just enough shelter to prevent them from dying of exposure. The guards found entertainment in making the prisoners fight each other for extra rations or better sleeping spaces. Most captives had learned to avoid these confrontations, but Jake was different. When a massive creature from the Vorthan system tried to take Jake's food during his 4th month of captivity, Jake fought back. The Vorthan was twice his size with 4 arms and natural armor plating, but Jake was faster and smarter. He used the creature's weight against it, tripping it into the electrified fence that surrounded their exercise yard. The Vorthan learned to leave the human alone. The guards noticed Jake's fighting ability and began putting him into the arena matches more frequently. The arena was a large circular pit, carved into the rock beneath the main prison compound. Prisoners were forced to fight for the entertainment of off-duty guards and visiting officials. Most matches ended with serious injury or death for at least one participant. Jake's first official arena fight was against a Zephyrian, a tall, thin creature with razor-sharp claws and incredible speed. The crowd of HFY guards expected the small human to die quickly and bloodily. Instead, Jake studied his opponent's movement patterns during the first few minutes of the fight, then used a discarded piece of metal pipe to block the creature's claws and strike at its joints. The Zephyrian fell after 10 minutes of combat, its leg broken in 2 places. Jake had won without killing his opponent, something that puzzled the watching HFY. In their culture, showing mercy to a defeated enemy was seen as weakness, but Jake could not bring himself to murder a creature that was as much a prisoner as he was. Word of the human fighter spread through the camp and beyond. Jake found himself facing increasingly dangerous opponents as the guards sought to test his limits. A crystalline being that could shoot energy from its fingertips learned that Jake could conduct that energy through metal objects and redirect it back at its source. A pack-hunting species that relied on coordinated attacks discovered that Jake could turn their own pack instincts against them by isolating individuals and forcing them to fight alone. Each victory brought Jake more respect from the guards and more hatred from the other prisoners, who saw his success as collaboration with their captors. Jake did not care what they thought. Every fight taught him more about alien biology and psychology. Every victory gave him leverage to negotiate better conditions for himself and sometimes for others. The arena fights also brought Jake to the attention of higher-ranking HFY officials. A commander named Thekral began attending Jake's matches regularly. Thekral was different from the common guards. He wore elaborate armor marked with battle honors and carried himself with the bearing of someone who had seen real combat, not just prison entertainment. After Jake's 20th arena victory, Thekral approached him in his cell. The HFY commander spoke better English than most of the guards, having studied captured human transmissions and records. "You fight with intelligence as well as courage," Thekral said, his golden eyes studying Jake intently. "Your tactics are unlike anything we have seen from captured species. You adapt to each opponent instead of relying on brute strength." Jake met the alien's gaze without flinching. Every species has weaknesses. Humans survive by finding those weaknesses and exploiting them. Theckral's head tilted in what Jake had learned was a Kethvar expression of interest. Your species was nearly extinct when we first encountered your ships. Your technology is primitive, your numbers small, yet you fought with a ferocity that impressed even our warriors. Why do your people resist when defeat is certain? Because surrender means extinction, Jake replied. Humans have learned that fighting impossible odds sometimes leads to survival. Giving up never does. The commander was quiet for a long moment, then spoke again. There are those among my people who believe humans might be useful allies rather than mere prisoners. Your performance in the arena suggests they may be correct. Jake felt his heart rate increase, but he kept his expression neutral. This was the first hint he had received, that not all Kethvar saw humans as inferior animals. What kind of allies? The kind that could help us win a war we have been losing for 2 centuries, Thekral said quietly. But such discussions are premature. First, you must prove that your tactical abilities extend beyond individual combat. The commander turned to leave, then paused at the cell door. Your next arena match will be different. Instead of facing a single opponent, you will lead a team of prisoners against multiple enemies. Show me that humans can command others in battle, and perhaps we can discuss more important matters. After Thekral left, Jake sat in his cell and considered what he had heard. The Kethvar were fighting a war they were losing. That explained their expansion into human space, their desperate search for new resources and allies. If Jake could prove his worth as a tactical leader, he might gain access to information that could help Earth prepare for whatever threat the Kethvar were fleeing from. The team arena match took place 1 week later. Jake found himself commanding 5 other prisoners, including a hulking Draknari who had never spoken to him, and 2 small Kelthani who communicated only through clicking sounds. Their opponents were 8 Kethvar guards armed with non-lethal but painful shock weapons. Jake spent the first few minutes of the fight studying his opponents and evaluating his team's capabilities. The Draknari was strong but slow. The Kelthani were fast and agile but fragile. The other 2 prisoners were average in all respects but seemed willing to follow orders. Using hand signals and simple commands, Jake coordinated his team's movements. He sent the Kelthani to distract the guards while the Draknari flanked around behind them. The other prisoners provided support and created diversions. Within 15 minutes, all 8 guards had been disabled without serious injury to any of Jake's team members. The crowd of watching Kethvar was unusually quiet when the match ended. Jake had not just won, he had made it look easy. More importantly, he had done it by turning a group of broken prisoners into a functional fighting unit. Thekral approached Jake after the match, his expression unreadable. Impressive, the commander said simply. Perhaps it is time we discussed that war I mentioned. Jake's private meetings with Commander Thekral began in his 6th year of captivity. They took place in a small chamber deep within the prison complex, away from the eyes and ears of other guards. The commander brought with him data tablets and holographic displays that showed star maps and battle reports Jake had never seen before. The truth about the Kethvar was more complex than Jake had imagined. They were not conquerors expanding their empire for glory or resources. They were refugees, fleeing from an enemy so terrible that their entire civilization had been forced to abandon their ancestral worlds and search for new places to make their stand. The enemy was called the HFY, and they were unlike anything Jake had encountered in his years of studying alien species in the prison camp. The HFY were not biological creatures, but machine intelligences that had evolved beyond their original programming. They consumed entire star systems, converting all matter and energy into more copies of themselves. They appeared in our space 230 years ago, Thekral explained, his clawed finger tracing paths on a 3-dimensional star map. At first, we thought they were another species we could fight and defeat. The Kethvar had never encountered an enemy we could not overcome through superior tactics and warrior spirit. Jake studied the holographic display, watching red markers spread across what had once been Kethvar territory. The pattern of conquest was methodical and relentless. World after world fell to the advancing machine fleet, until the Kethvar controlled less than a quarter of their original space. Why haven't they caught up with you here? Jake asked. This world seems well defended. Thekral's expression grew grim. Dekmor is not our original homeworld. We abandoned that 50 years ago when the HFY fleet grew too large to hold back. This system is our 3rd attempt at establishing a new capital. We have been running and fighting for generations, always staying one step ahead of total extinction. The implications were staggering. The mighty Kethvar Empire that had seemed so powerful when they captured Jake's squadron was actually a shadow of its former self. They had been fighting a losing retreat for centuries, and their expansion into human space was not aggression, but desperation. Your people's territory lies directly in the path the Vexhai will take when they finish consuming our remaining worlds, Thekral continued. Earth and all human colonies will fall unless we find a way to stop them here. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold chamber. How long do we have? Our best estimates suggest the Vexhai main fleet will reach this sector within 20 years, Thekral replied. Advanced scouts could arrive much sooner. When that happens, both our species will face extinction unless we have found a way to defeat them. The commander activated another holographic display, this one showing detailed analyses of human military tactics and technology. Jake was surprised to see how much the Kethvar had learned from studying captured Earth Defense Force vessels and personnel records. Human military doctrine is fascinating to us, Thekral said. Your species compensates for technological inferiority through innovation and adaptability. You use unconventional tactics that our enemies cannot predict or counter effectively. These abilities could be crucial in fighting the Vexhai. Jake began to understand why he had been kept alive and why Thekral was sharing this information with him. You want humans and Kethvar to fight together against this machine intelligence? Some of us do, Thekral corrected. Others in the military command believe humans are too primitive to be effective allies. They see your species as potential slaves or cannon fodder, nothing more. The debate has been ongoing since your capture. Over the following months, Jake learned more about Kethvar society and politics than any human had ever known. The warrior culture that defined their civilization was both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. Kethvar military doctrine emphasized honor, direct confrontation, and individual combat prowess. These qualities had served them well against biological enemies but proved inadequate against the methodical advance of machine intelligences. Thekral arranged for Jake to meet other Kethvar who supported the alliance idea. These were mostly younger officers and engineers who had grown up during the long retreat from the Vexhai. They had seen traditional tactics fail repeatedly and were willing to consider new approaches, even if they came from primitive alien species. One of these allies became particularly important to Jake's growing understanding of the situation. Zextal was a low-caste Kethvar engineer, responsible for maintaining the prison's power systems and security devices. Unlike the warrior castes, engineers were expected to be practical and flexible in their thinking, qualities that made Zexatul more open to human ideas. Zextal spoke broken English, but understood the language well enough to have long conversations with Jake during maintenance visits to the prison blocks. Through these talks, Jake learned about the internal divisions within Kethvar society that the warrior castes tried to hide. Many of our people are tired of running, Zextul explained during one of their secret meetings. The younger generation has never known victory, only retreat and defeat. They question whether the old ways of fighting are still relevant against an enemy like the Vexhai. Jake began to see an opportunity. If he could demonstrate that human tactical thinking could give the Kethvar an advantage against their machine enemies, it might tip the balance of opinion within their leadership. The challenge was finding a way to prove his theories without access to real military resources or combat situations. The answer came from an unexpected source. A group of captured Vexhai drones had been brought to Thekmor for study by Kethvar scientists. The machines had been deactivated and dissected, but their basic programming and behavior patterns could still be analyzed. Jake convinced Thekral to let him examine these captured drones and develop tactics specifically designed to counter their capabilities. What Jake discovered changed his entire understanding of the war between the Kethvar and the Vexhai. The machine intelligences were incredibly sophisticated, but they followed predictable patterns based on mathematical optimization and logical decision trees. They could adapt to new situations, but that adaptation took time and followed systematic processes. Human intuition and creativity, qualities that often seemed random or illogical to other species, might be exactly what was needed to confuse and outmaneuver machine minds that relied on predictable patterns. Jake began developing tactical concepts that deliberately incorporated chaos and unpredictability, approaches that violated every principle of traditional Kethvar military doctrine. He presented His ideas took corral in a series of detailed reports that used captured HFY technology to model potential battle scenarios. The results were impressive enough to get the attention of higher-ranking commanders, including some who had previously dismissed humans as worthless primitives. "Your tactical innovations show promise," General Kexmore admitted during a meeting in the prison's command center. "But theory is not the same as practice. How can we know these concepts will work in actual combat against fully operational HFY forces?" Jake had been waiting for that question. "Give me a chance to train a mixed unit of humans and HFY working together. Let me show you what our species can accomplish as allies instead of prisoner and captor." The general's golden eyes narrowed. "You ask us to arm humans and treat them as equals in combat. Many of our people would see this as madness or treason." "With respect, General," Jake replied. "Continuing to lose ground to the HFY while refusing to try new approaches would be true madness. My people and yours are going to face extinction together whether we cooperate or not. Working as allies gives us both a better chance of survival." The debate that followed Jake's proposal split the HFY command structure down the middle. Progressive officers supported the alliance, while traditionalists opposed any cooperation with primitive species. The argument grew so heated that it began to affect military discipline and operational efficiency throughout the fleet. Finally, General Kexmore made a decision that would change the course of both wars. "We will conduct a limited test of these human tactical concepts. Jake Morrison will be given command of a mixed unit consisting of volunteer HFY personnel and selected human prisoners. They will be equipped with standard weapons and vehicles and given a real combat mission against HFY forward scouts." Jake felt his pulse quicken. After 6 years of imprisonment, he was finally being offered a chance to fight back against the enemies threatening both Earth and the HFY. More importantly, he was being given the opportunity to prove that humans and aliens could fight as equals and allies. The announcement of the experimental unit caused immediate controversy throughout the HFY fleet. Some officers requested transfers rather than serve alongside humans. Others volunteered eagerly, tired of losing battles with traditional tactics. The division within their society was becoming a crisis that threatened their unity just when they needed it most. Jake understood that his next actions would determine not just his own fate, but the future relationship between humanity and the HFY. Success could forge an alliance that might save both species. The experimental unit assembled in a converted cargo bay that had been transformed into a training facility. Jake stood before his new command, studying the mixed group of humans and HFY who would either prove his theories or die trying. 12 HFY volunteers had stepped forward, mostly young officers from the engineering and communications castes who had grown tired of traditional military failures. 8 human prisoners had survived long enough to be considered for combat duty, men and women who had maintained their fighting spirit despite years of captivity. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a blade. The HFY volunteers looked at their human counterparts with mixtures of curiosity and disdain. The humans regarded the aliens who had imprisoned them with hatred and suspicion. Jake knew that creating a functional fighting unit from these two groups would require more than tactical innovation. It would require a fundamental change in how both species viewed each other. "I know most of you don't want to be here," Jake began, speaking in English and then repeating his words in the HFY language he had learned during his imprisonment. "Humans, you're being asked to fight alongside the people who destroyed your ships and killed your friends. HFY, you're being ordered to treat primitive aliens as equals in combat. Both sides have good reasons to hate this arrangement." A HFY officer named Veltar stepped forward, his scales bristling with agitation. "Human, I volunteered for this unit because traditional tactics have failed against the machine enemies. But do not mistake my presence here for acceptance of your species as true warriors." Jake nodded calmly. "Fair enough. I'm not asking anyone to forget the past or pretend we're all friends. I'm asking you to focus on staying alive long enough to kill the real enemies. The HFY don't care about our politics or our prejudices. They just want to convert us all into raw materials." The first weeks of training were a disaster. Human and HFY squad members refused to coordinate their movements. Communication broke down constantly as both sides insisted on using their own languages and tactical terminology. Equipment designed for HFY physiology didn't work properly when operated by humans, while human intuitive approaches to problem-solving confused and frustrated their alien counterparts. Jake spent 18 hours a day working with individual team members, teaching HFY volunteers to think flexibly while helping humans understand alien technology and battlefield doctrine. Progress was measured in millimeters rather than miles, and several times Jake thought the experiment would collapse before it truly began. The breakthrough came during a simulated battle exercise in the 4th week of training. The mixed unit was facing a scenario based on actual Vex-High assault patterns, with training drones programmed to behave like machine enemies. Traditional HFY tactics called for a direct frontal assault with heavy weapons, but Jake had convinced his team to try a more complex approach. Human squad members used their smaller size and agility to infiltrate the enemy perimeter, while HFY heavy weapons specialists provided covering fire from concealed positions. The aliens' superior firepower kept the drones occupied while the humans planted explosive charges at critical points in their formation. When the charges detonated, the HFY assault teams moved in to finish off the disrupted enemy forces. The exercise was over in 12 minutes, less than half the time required by traditional assault methods. More importantly, the mixed unit had achieved their objectives with 0 casualties, something that rarely happened in conventional HFY training scenarios. Word of the successful exercise spread quickly through the fleet, creating both excitement and alarm among different factions within the military command. Progressive officers saw it as proof that human HFY cooperation could work in actual combat. Traditionalists claimed the exercise had been rigged to favor unconventional tactics and demanded more realistic testing. General Kexmore decided to settle the debate by assigning Jake's unit to a real combat mission. Vex-High scout ships had been detected in a nearby system, conducting reconnaissance and resource assessment activities that typically preceded major assault operations. A traditional HFY strike force had already failed to eliminate these scouts, losing 3 ships and achieving minimal damage to enemy forces. Your unit will accompany our 2nd assault wave, General Kexmore informed Jake during a briefing session in the Fleet Command Center. If your unconventional approaches prove effective against actual Vex-High forces, the Military Council will consider expanding the integration program. If you fail, the experiment ends permanently. Jake understood the stakes. This mission would determine not just his own fate, but the future of human HFY relations and possibly the outcome of the war against the machine intelligence. He had one chance to prove that cooperation between their species could succeed where traditional methods had failed. The mixed unit deployed aboard a modified HFY cruiser equipped with both alien and human-designed systems. Jake had convinced the ship's captain to install human-style sensor arrays and communication equipment alongside the standard HFY military hardware. The combination allowed for more flexible tactical responses and better coordination between different elements of the attacking force. The target system contained 4 Vex-High scout ships operating around a gas giant that was being strip-mined for raw materials. The machines had already begun constructing orbital processing facilities and defensive platforms, turning the entire area into a fortified base of operations. Previous HFY attacks had failed because they focused on destroying the scout ships while ignoring the industrial infrastructure that the machines could use for reinforcement and repair. Jake's plan was different. Instead of attacking the ships directly, his unit would target the processing facilities and construction equipment that the Vex-High needed to maintain their operations. Without these resources, the scout ships would be forced to withdraw or face gradual degradation of their combat capabilities. The approach required precise coordination between human infiltration teams and HFY fire support elements. Human operatives would use their smaller signatures and creative thinking to penetrate machine defenses and place charges at critical points. HFY heavy weapons would provide diversionary attacks and elimination of major threats that were beyond human capabilities to handle. The mission began with a carefully coordinated assault on the outer defensive perimeter. HFY ships engaged the Vex-High scouts in direct combat, drawing their attention and forcing them to commit their resources to traditional ship-to-ship fighting. While the machines focused on this obvious threat, human infiltration teams approached the processing facilities using captured Vex-High technology to mask their signatures. Jake led one of the infiltration teams personally, accompanied by 2 human specialists and a HFY engineer who understood the alien equipment they would need to sabotage. Moving through the industrial complex was like navigating a mechanical nightmare, with automated systems and robotic guardians monitoring every corridor and chamber. The key to success was thinking like humans rather than machines. Instead of following optimal paths or logical approaches, Jake's team moved randomly through the facility, doubling back on their own routes and taking inefficient detours that confused the Vex-High tracking systems. Machine intelligences expected intruders to behave rationally, making the chaotic human approach nearly invisible to their detection algorithms. Within 2 hours, all 4 processing facilities had been rigged with explosive charges set to detonate simultaneously. The blast would not only destroy the industrial equipment, but also disrupt the power grid that supported the defensive platforms and communication systems throughout the base. The explosions lit up the gas giants' atmosphere like artificial lightning. Secondary detonations followed as stored materials and fuel supplies caught fire and spread the destruction throughout the Vex-High operation. Within minutes, the carefully organized machine base had been reduced to scattered debris and failing systems. The scout ships found themselves cut off from their support infrastructure and facing continued attacks from HFY forces that suddenly seemed much more effective. Without the ability to repair damage or replenish ammunition, the machines were forced to retreat from the system entirely, abandoning their construction projects and resource extraction operations. Jake's mixed unit had achieved complete mission success with minimal casualties. More importantly, they had demonstrated that human creativity and HFY military strength could combine to produce results that neither species could achieve alone. The victory sent shockwaves through both the progressive and traditionalist factions within the HFY fleet. The debate that followed the successful mission was more intense than anything that had come before. Progressive officers demanded immediate expansion of the integration program and formal alliance negotiations with captured human personnel. Traditionalists accused their colleagues of abandoning sacred warrior traditions and compromising the racial purity that defined HFY identity. The argument became so heated that it began to threaten the unity of the entire fleet. Ship captains chose sides and refused to cooperate with vessels commanded by officers from opposing factions. The massive HFY fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, with a thunderous distortion of spacetime that sent shockwaves through every sensor array within 100 million kilometers. 300 warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with battle honors and weapon modifications that spoke of years of continuous warfare. At the center of the formation, the flagship HFY stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its command tower bristling with communications equipment and defensive systems. On the bridge of the flagship, Jake Morrison stood beside the captain's chair, wearing the distinctive armor of a HFY fleet commander. The uniform had been specially crafted to fit his human physique, while incorporating all the rank insignia and battle decorations he had earned during 4 years of joint operations against Vex-High forces. The golden scales worked into the shoulder plates marked him as Supreme Allied Commander, a rank that had never existed before his appointment. Earth's defense satellites detected the arrival immediately and began broadcasting emergency signals throughout the solar system. Military installations on Mars and the asteroid mining colonies went to maximum alert status. The few remaining Earth Defense Force ships scrambled to intercept positions, though their outdated vessels were hopelessly outmatched by the alien technology now surrounding their homeworld. Jake opened a communication channel using the proper Earth Defense Force protocols he had memorized during his years of captivity. His message was broadcast on all military frequencies and civilian emergency bands simultaneously, ensuring that every human settlement in the system would receive it within minutes. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force, serial number 774 Alpha 992, he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded alien armies in desperate battles across a dozen star systems. "I am addressing Earth Command from the bridge of the HFY flagship HFY, as Supreme Allied Commander of the human HFY Expeditionary Fleet. Do not attempt to engage our vessels. We are here as allies, not enemies." The response from Earth was immediate and chaotic. Multiple voices tried to speak at once over the communication channels as military commanders, government officials, and news organizations all demanded explanations simultaneously. Jake waited patiently for the confusion to die down, understanding that his return would be shocking to people who had assumed he died 10 years ago. Admiral Helen Grant's voice finally cut through the noise with military authority that reminded Jake of his early days in the Defense Force. "This is Admiral Grant, Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces. Jake Morrison was declared killed in action 10 years ago during a reconnaissance mission beyond the Outer Rim. Identify yourself properly and explain the presence of this alien fleet in our space." "Admiral Grant, I remember you from the War College lectures on deep space tactics," Jake replied calmly. "You used to say that the greatest victories come from turning enemies into allies. I'm here to prove you were right. The Kethvar fleet you see before you was our enemy 10 years ago. Today they are humanity's best hope for survival." Jake spent the next hour explaining the situation to increasingly larger groups of Earth officials as word of his return spread through the government and military hierarchies. He described his capture, imprisonment, and eventual integration into Kethvar society as they fought their desperate war against the Vexhai machine intelligence. He provided detailed intelligence about the enemy that was advancing toward human space, along with tactical assessments that painted a grim picture of Earth's chances if they faced the machines alone. The reaction from Earth was mixed and predictable. Military leaders focused on the tactical implications and began demanding detailed information about Vexhai capabilities and weaknesses. Politicians worried about public reaction and the political consequences of allying with aliens who had previously attacked human colonies. Scientists and engineers were fascinated by the advanced technology visible on the Kethvar ships and wanted immediate access to alien technical specifications. Some Earth officials refused to believe Jake's story entirely. General Marcus Webb, who had replaced Jake's former commander, insisted that the entire situation was an elaborate deception designed to lower Earth's defenses before a full-scale alien invasion. He demanded that Jake submit to psychological evaluation and interrogation to determine whether he had been brainwashed or replaced by an alien imposter. "I understand your concerns, General Webb," Jake said during a tense video conference with Earth's military leadership. 10 years ago, I would have reacted the same way to a story this incredible. But the evidence is all around you. 300 Kethvar warships are sitting peacefully in your outer system, instead of attacking your colonies. That should tell you something about our intentions. To prove his identity and credibility, Jake provided personal details that only the real Jake Morrison would know, including classified mission reports and private conversations with fellow officers that had never been recorded in official records. He also arranged for several Earth Defense Force veterans to visit the Kethvar flagship and verify his identity in person. Captain Roy Davis was among the first to accept transport to the alien vessel. Roy had been Jake's wingman during the fateful reconnaissance mission that led to his capture, and he was one of the few people who could definitively confirm Jake's identity. The reunion between the two old friends was emotional and helped convince many skeptics that Jake's story was genuine. "You look different," Roy observed as they stood together in the flagship's observation deck, watching Earth turn slowly in the distance. "Not just older. You carry yourself like someone who has commanded armies and made life or death decisions for entire civilizations." Jake nodded thoughtfully. 10 years of war changes a person. I've seen things that would have been impossible to imagine when we were flying reconnaissance missions together. I've learned that humans and aliens have more in common than either side wants to admit. The most difficult part of Jake's return was convincing Earth's population that the alliance was necessary and beneficial. Public opinion polls showed that most humans supported defending against the Vexhai threat, but they were deeply suspicious of cooperating with aliens who had previously been enemies. Protests erupted in major cities as various political groups demanded everything from immediate military action against the Kethvar fleet to complete surrender to avoid provoking further alien attention. Jake addressed these concerns during a global television broadcast that reached every human settlement in the solar system. He spoke directly to the camera, explaining the situation in simple terms that ordinary citizens could understand. He described the Vexhai as an existential threat that would consume all biological life in their path, making human-alien cooperation a matter of survival rather than political preference. "I know it's hard to trust people who used to be our enemies," Jake said during the broadcast, "but the alternative is extinction for both our species. The Kethavar have been fighting this war for over 2 centuries, and they're losing. We can't win alone either. Together we might have a chance. The broadcast had its intended effect of calming public fears and building support for the alliance, but it also attracted attention from Earth's various intelligence agencies and political factions. Some groups saw Jake as a hero, who had forged a crucial alliance under impossible circumstances. Others viewed him as a traitor, who had been corrupted by years of alien influence. Several assassination attempts were made against Jake during his visits to Earth's surface for alliance negotiations. The most serious occurred during a joint military planning session at the Pentagon, when a group of human extremists tried to detonate a bomb in the conference room, where Jake was meeting with Earth's senior commanders. Kethavar security personnel detected the threat and neutralized it before anyone was harmed, but the incident highlighted the divisions within human society that the alliance would have to overcome. Despite these challenges, the formal alliance treaty was signed 3 months after Jake's return to human space. The ceremony took place aboard the Thekvanor, with representatives from both Earth's government and the Kethavar Military Council participating. Jake served as translator and mediator, helping both sides understand the cultural and political implications of their agreement. The alliance provided for immediate technology transfer programs that would upgrade Earth's defensive capabilities using Kethavar innovations. Human personnel would be integrated into alien military units, while Kethavar advisors would help restructure Earth's forces for the kind of warfare they would face against machine enemies. Most importantly, the combined fleets would begin joint training exercises and defensive preparations for the Vexhi, advance that intelligence projections showed arriving. Within 18 months, Jake's role in the new alliance was complex and demanding. As Supreme Allied Commander, he was responsible for coordinating military operations between 2 very different species, with distinct tactical doctrines and cultural approaches to warfare. He had to balance the aggressive, honor-focused mentality of Kethavar warriors with the flexible, innovation-driven approach that characterized human military thinking. Captain Jake Morrison checked his instruments one more time as his small squadron moved through the dark space near the outer rim. The stars looked different out here, cold and distant from Earth. His ship, the Falcon, was one of 3 scout vessels sent to investigate strange energy readings that had appeared on long-range sensors 2 weeks ago. Command wanted to know what was out there before sending larger ships. Jake had been flying for the Earth Defense Force for 8 years. He knew space combat better than most pilots his age. His crew trusted him completely. Lieutenant Sam Carter sat at the weapons console, running final checks on their defense systems. Navigator Lisa Park plotted their course through the asteroid field ahead. Engineer Pete Baker monitored the engines from his station. The energy readings grew stronger as they approached the target coordinates. Jake felt something was wrong but could not explain why. The space around them seemed too quiet, too empty. His instincts told him to turn back, but orders were orders. Earth needed to know what was happening in this sector. "Captain, I'm picking up massive energy signatures ahead," Lisa said from her station. Her voice carried a note of concern. "These readings are off the charts. Whatever's out there is huge." Jake nodded and opened a channel to the other 2 ships in his squadron. "Phoenix and Eagle, this is Falcon. Are you seeing these readings?" "Confirmed, Falcon," came the reply from Captain Roy Davis in the Phoenix. "My sensors are going crazy. This technology is nothing like ours." Before Jake could respond, the space in front of them exploded with light. Dozens of ships appeared out of nowhere, their hulls gleaming with an alien metal that reflected the starlight in strange ways. The vessels were massive, easily 10 times larger than anything in the Earth fleet. Their design was unlike anything humans had ever seen, with curved surfaces and weapon ports that glowed with purple energy. "All ships, battle stations," Jake shouted into his communicator. "We've got company and they don't look friendly." The alien ships moved with surprising speed for their size. Purple beams of energy lanced out toward the human vessels. The first shots missed, but Jake knew they were just finding their range. He threw the Falcon into a tight turn, trying to get behind the cover of a large asteroid. "Sam, return fire," Jake ordered. "Lisa, plot us a course out of here. We need to warn Earth about this." The Falcon's weapons fired back at the alien ships, but their shots barely scratched the enemy hull plating. The alien weapons, however, packed devastating power. Jake watched in horror as one beam struck the Eagle directly. Captain Bill Stone's ship exploded in a ball of flame and metal, taking all hands with it. "Eagle is down." Roy's voice crackled over the radio from the Phoenix. "Jake, we can't fight these things. Their shields are too strong." Jake knew Roy was right, but running was not an option. If these aliens were hostile, Earth needed to know about them. Someone had to survive to carry the warning home. He made a decision that would change his life forever. "Phoenix, break off and head for Earth," Jake commanded. "Get word back to command. Tell them what we found here." "What about you?" Roy asked. "Someone needs to buy you time to escape," Jake replied. "The Falcon will keep them busy." Jake turned his ship toward the alien fleet and pushed the engines to full power. The Falcon raced toward the nearest enemy vessel, weapons firing continuously. He knew it was a suicide run, but it might give the Phoenix enough time to jump to hyperspace. The alien ship he targeted was enormous, its hull covered with weapon emplacements and strange markings. As the Falcon approached, Jake noticed movement behind transparent sections of the hull. He could see shapes moving inside, but they were not human shapes. These beings were tall and moved in ways that seemed reptilian. Multiple energy beams reached out toward the Falcon. Jake twisted and turned his ship, dodging most of the incoming fire, but he could not avoid everything. One beam clipped his port engine, sending the ship into a spinning tumble. Another hit took out his weapon systems completely. "Captain, we've lost engines and weapons," Pete reported from his station. "Hull breach in Section 4. We're venting atmosphere." Jake fought to regain control of his ship, but it was hopeless. The Falcon was dead in space, drifting helplessly toward the alien fleet. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red light as systems failed one by one. He could hear the Phoenix's engines firing as Roy's ship accelerated away from the battle zone. At least one ship would make it home. Strange new beams reached out from the alien vessels, but these did not destroy the Falcon. Instead, they seemed to grab the ship and pull it toward the largest alien vessel. Jake realized these beings had some kind of tractor beam technology. They were not trying to kill him anymore. They wanted to capture him. The Falcon disappeared into a massive bay inside the alien ship. Jake and his remaining crew found themselves surrounded by beings unlike anything they had ever imagined. The aliens were tall, nearly 7 feet in height, with scaled skin that ranged from dark green to brown. Their eyes were large and golden, and their faces were distinctly reptilian. They moved with fluid grace and carried weapons that hummed with energy. The aliens spoke in a language of clicks and hisses that sounded nothing like any human tongue. They seemed to be examining the humans with great interest, as if they had never seen creatures like them before. Jake noticed that some of the aliens wore different colored armor, suggesting some kind of rank system. One alien, wearing elaborate red and gold armor, approached Jake directly. This being was larger than the others and carried himself with obvious authority. He studied Jake for a long moment, then spoke in broken but understandable English. "You are the leader of these small fighters," the alien said. His voice was deep and carried an accent unlike anything Jake had heard. "Your species shows courage in the face of certain death. This interests us greatly." Jake straightened despite his injuries and looked the alien leader in the eye. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. By the laws of war, I demand proper treatment for myself and my crew." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your laws mean nothing here, small fighter. You are now prisoners of the Kethvar Empire. Your fate will be decided by our commanders." As Jake was led away with his surviving crew members, he wondered if Roy had made it back to Earth. Would humanity be ready for what was coming? He had no way of knowing that his capture was just the beginning of a journey that would transform him, from prisoner to leader, from human to something far more than either species could imagine alone.